Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So we're coming up to spring. It's going to be hopefully a nice gardening season this year. So what jobs can you do now in spring? What jobs can you do in March to get your garden ready for the growing season going forward? And I'm going to show you some of those things. So I've got this mint plant and the winter's really treated it badly and it's looking quite worse for wear. So what I'm going to do with this plant is I'm going to prune it back really hard. Just go for it. You don't really need to be careful with this. You can just really prune it back hard and it'll come back. It'll really come back to life. There we go. And already it's looking miles better and the garden's looking miles tidier as well. So this is an Egyptian mint and this plant's actually done the rounds. I've sent it round to quite a few different people. I've sent cuttings round to quite a few different people. And that'll be really in good stead to come up and give us a nice load of mint this year. So all these prunings, they're just going to go onto the compost pile and I'm going to get rid of them that way. This video is going to involve a lot of pruning and a lot of tidying. Now I've got a lavender plant here and I'm going to give this a little bit of a tidy up. And what I'm doing is I'm going to take all these old flower stalks that have died and I'm going to just prune them back. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to prune back into the brown, because the brown doesn't, on lavender, the brown doesn't grow back. So you've got to be careful of not pruning back into the brown. It's only the green that grows back. So I'm just going to find a brown bud and just trim it back, a green bud, sorry, where a green bud's coming from, and just trim it back to there and then it'll keep growing. And give this lavender some shape and come back, it'll come back nicely inshallah. So the daffodils are coming into bloom now. You can see the buds on them and hopefully they should bloom pretty soon. So I'm looking forward to a good season. So with that, it's these borders that need tidying up. You can see quite a few of the annuals that have died back. These are going to need cutting back. I never take the roots out. I always leave the roots into the ground. And these chrysanthemums as well, I mean, these are sorry, and these daisies, I can't remember the exact name, but what I'm going to do with them is I'm going to give them a nice trim back, but I'm not going to throw that away when I cut it. I'm going to take that and I'm going to root them. I'm going to grow them into new plants and they're going to populate my garden. So with these, I am just going to cut them nicely back and give them a good tidy, get them nice and clean and ready for the season to go forward again. And I did this about this time last year and I made loads of, from these prunings, I made loads of new plants. When you do this and you take your own cuttings, it's a good way of generating free plants and it takes a lot of the expense out of gardening. So it doesn't have to be an expensive hobby. You can make it as expensive or as cheap as you like. And you know me, I like working on a budget. So let's just get this nice and tidy. And you don't have to be, like things like that they're no good. That's going in the compost pile. Anything that looks really dead, that's coming straight out. So anything that looks dead like that, that's coming straight out. And now that'll have a nice shape to it. These weak spindly ones, they can come out and that'll have a nice shape to it and it'll come up nicely. And that's a dead branch as well, so that can come out. Yeah, anything that's dead. What you could do with this is just break them up and just leave them on the ground and that'll just go on and break down and feed the soil even more. So these are now nearly 3 years old and they're still producing. They're still producing nice flowers for us. So I'm going to do the same thing with this one behind me, and I'm going to tidy up the rest of this border, and we'll get this garden looking tidy again, ready for spring. So the winter winds around where we are in the middle of the city, they bring in with them a whole host of rubbish, and this is what I'm doing now. And this is all just plastic waste. A lot of it is just plastic waste that's blown in. So I'm just picking this stuff out of my lawn. I mean, there's a few clothes pegs in here. I don't know if they can be used again, but we'll have a look. So all this plastic is just getting picked up and it'll get tidied up. So there's other bits of rubbish that's blown in, but this is all mainly plastic that I'm worried about. So let's get all these bits of plastic picked up and out of the grass, out of the environment. I'm going to get the kids on this, and I'll pay them to. I'll turn it into a little competition and say who can pick up the most grass, who can pick up the most plastic, and send them out picking all this sort of stuff up. So now's a good time to tidy up these little beds. I mean, we haven't had much. I'll put wood chips on these beds before winter and let that work its way in. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull some of these wood chips to one side. And now is the perfect time to apply compost to your beds. I mean, there's a plant there that's breaking down, and I'm going to just leave that there. I'm just going to cover it in wood compost. So personally, I'm one of those people who thinks compost is best applied in spring, not autumn. If you're going to mulch with nothing else, compost is fine in autumn, but I think personally compost is best applied in spring so it can feed your soil and not lose all the nutrients through the winter rains when nothing's growing. These are some flowers that we've got that'll pop up, and I'm going to have some peonies that'll pop up here pretty soon, and they put on a lovely display. They started flowering a couple of seasons ago, and they'll put on a lovely display. So I'll pull these wood chips over the top now and just leave them, and there we've got my compost sandwiched underneath the wood chips. Beautiful. And that's this little bed prepared, and I'm just going to carry on doing that with all my beds and getting them all prepared. You can see my peas starting to make an appearance, and these are the peas that I planted in my what to plant in February video, and in the next couple of weeks they'll get to about 4 or 5 inches tall, and then I'll get those ready to plant out in probably about the second week of March. I'm in the greenhouse now, and what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to finish weeding off little annual weeds that are popping up, and they're all going to go on the compost pile. Let's get them out of the ground. And the radishes that I planted in my February video, they're starting to make an appearance, so we should have some radishes to harvest in probably by the end of March. They'll turn into a nice little crop for us. They're a very fast growing crop, and we'll be able to pick those. But what I am going to do here is I'm just going to rake this bed level. Let's get those little bits of annual weeds. But I'm just going to rake it level, and then once it's had that surface disturbance, I'm just going to apply some more compost to this. I mean, inside my greenhouse, because there's a lot of fast growing tender crops, I don't use wood chips on my beds. I just use a lot of semi broken down compost and chicken bedding that goes straight onto here. So what I should have done actually with this bed is what I normally do is during the winter, whenever we get some chicken bedding, the chicken bedding gets applied to it, and that breaks down and feeds the soil. We've had a few issues around illness and stuff like that, so that's one of the things that I've not been able to do. But that's what I would have ideally liked to do, get this bed covered with a lot of chicken bedding and animal bedding and let that break down. I wouldn't have to do what I'm doing now, levelling it off and applying compost. Let's get that dandelion out. There we go. These beds are just so easy to dig. I can just literally dig them with my hands. Look at that. That's how friable the soil is here if I want to dig it. And that's what my garden beds are like outside as well. This is the natural soil that's turned into this growing medium, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's getting a little bit late, but you can still get these apple trees pruned back before they've got to start budding and getting into, before they start growing. And all I'm going to do is tidy and pruning, and anything that's growing inwards, that's the stuff that I'm going to be removing. So all the branches that are growing inwards, anything that's damaged, just to open up the tree and give it some, just to get the tree opened up. Things like these water shoots, these are coming out. I don't want them growing up. I mean, one of the things that we did with this tree is instead of keeping it at a low height, because our neighbours built that dormer, we let it grow up to give us that privacy in the summer, because we don't want them looking into our garden. So that's all I'm doing here, is I'm just going to take out anything that's growing upwards, like these spindly little branches. These things on the side, they're fine. There's not lots that needs doing, but anything that's crossing, anything that's growing out upwards, that's all coming out. So things like that, that's coming out. And I'll just carry on getting those pruned. And it's the same thing that you can do with these raspberries down here. Right. We get a really bumper crop of raspberries, so much so that we can't eat them all, and you can see the remnants of the raspberries still on the canes. I mean, that's okay for us. What we eat and what's left over, the birds eat. So it works in harmony. We encourage the birds to come in and get a good winter feed when there's not much left in the environment for them to eat. There's some raspberries here for them. These are autumn fruiting raspberries. So what I'm going to do with these is I'm going to cut them hard back to the ground. So these are just planted underneath my apple trees, and it's in a space where nothing else really grows. But these raspberries will grow really well here. And what I've got this year is I'm going to stick some lupins under here as well. I was looking for some edible lupins, but I've not been able to find any edible lupins, so I've just got some ornamental ones, and they're going to have to do my job, because lupins are nitrogen fixers, and it's good to have them in when you've got apple trees and fruit trees and stuff like that. All of these prunings that I'm gathering, I've got a chipper, so these will all go through the chipper and they'll go on to make my mulch and my wood chips and that sort of thing. If I didn't have a chipper, then what I would have done was I'd have just broke them up into as smaller pieces as possible, and they would have just they can either go back on the ground like that, or they can go onto the compost pile and they'll break down, and in a few months they'll go back to feed your soil. Whenever you're making compost, it's always good to use material that's local. When you've got material that's local, your plants know what's in the soil and what they need to, and they can adapt to that. You can see all bits of plastic that the wind's blown in, and the kids are going to get litter picking soon, and we'll get all this plastic picked up. But this is my strawberry patch. So this strawberry patch goes from all the way down here, and it carries on all the way up here, up underneath my cherry tree, underneath my plum tree, and it just carries on all the way up to the top, where I've got strawberries and raspberries mixed in together. And again, these raspberries need pruning back, so I'll prune those back. So it's also a good time to come in and tidy these strawberries up. If you left these brown leaves on the ground, they'd break down and they'd clean themselves up, and you won't have any issues. But if you wanted to, you can come in and just pick these brown leaves off. You don't need to do much, just a little pull and the brown leaves should just come off. Don't yank stuff. Anything that's coming off is going to come off. Anything that's coming off just with a little gentle pull, that's the stuff to remove. But anything that's attached to the plant, leave it. One thing you've got to keep an eye out for is this kind of plant here. I mean, that plant can be very easily mistaken for a strawberry. It looks very similar, and it always grows in my strawberry bed. I can't remember the name of it, but it is a perennial weed. So dig things like that out, remove them and get them out of your bed. What you'll notice later on this month is the strawberries are going to start sending out runners. And so one of the good things is to start picking off those runners and start potting those runners up, and you end up with 3 strawberry plants. all this bed that you can see, I started off with about 8 plants. Now I've got about 100 plants here. What I do is I move my patch down a little bit every year. So the oldest patch is at the top. They get dug up and thrown away. Every year I'll be taking a section out, changing them, taking a section out, changing them. I did a video, one of my early videos that I did was planting free strawberry plants, and I went into how you can gain lots and lots of free strawberry plants for nothing. So that's a few jobs that you can be doing in March, getting ready for spring and getting ready for the gardening season coming up. It's starting to rain. I don't want to get too wet and I don't want to get ill again. So I'm going to leave it there for this one. Don't forget to hit that like for me and hit the subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.